everything. Walking into any room and instantly understanding what people are feeling without them saying a word. Imagine having the ability to connect so deeply with others that they feel drawn to you, everything, trust you and respect you, without force, without manipulation, simply because you know how to read and respond to human behavior. That is the power of social intelligence, everything. And here's the truth: success in life, in relationships, and in leadership doesn't belong to the smartest person in the room. It belongs to the person who understands people, everything. This audiobook is not just about theory. It's about mastering the psychology of human behavior so you can create influence, build stronger connections, everything, and move through life with confidence, clarity, and authenticity. When you look at the world around you, it might sometimes feel as if people are unpredictable, everything. Someone snaps at you for no reason, a colleague suddenly becomes distant, or a friend reacts in a way you never expected. We often shake our heads and think, why did they do that? Everything. What were they thinking? But here's a secret very few people are ever told: human behavior is not random. Behind every word spoken, behind every action taken, everything, and behind every choice made, there is a reason. People operate from patterns, often hidden, but once you begin to understand them, the fog lifts and you see clearly what once felt chaotic, everything. Think of it like learning a new language. At first, all you hear are strange sounds. It feels confusing, even overwhelming. But once you start to recognize the rules, the patterns, everything, the way certain words always follow others, suddenly the language makes sense. You can anticipate what comes next. Human behavior works in the same way. Beneath the surface, everything, there are patterns, psychological, emotional, even biological, that drive why people think, feel, and act as they do. And when you learn to decode these patterns, everything, you gain an extraordinary lens on life. Let's take something simple: the way people respond to stress. One person lashes out in anger, another withdraws in silence, everything, and another tries to joke and lighten the mood. On the surface, these reactions seem wildly different. But when you look closer, they are all responses to the same core human need, everything, the need for safety. The angry outburst is a shield, a way to push the world back. The silent withdrawal is an attempt to hide and protect. The joking is a distraction, everything, a way to pretend everything is okay. Each reaction looks different, but they all stem from the same root, everything. This is what I mean when I say behavior is predictable. It's about identifying the roots, not just watching the branches, everything. I remember once coaching a young professional who felt lost in his career because he couldn't understand why his boss seemed to dislike him. He worked hard, met deadlines, everything, and never made mistakes, yet his boss always seemed irritated. Most people would have taken it personally or assumed their boss was just difficult. But when we examined the situation, everything, it became clear that the boss wasn't reacting to the young man's competence. He was reacting to his silence. The young professional never shared updates unless asked. To him, everything, staying quiet, was respect. To his boss, silence was uncertainty. Once he learned to proactively communicate, the relationship transformed. Nothing changed about his work ethic, everything, only his understanding of what behavior meant. Here's the truth: people's actions are mirrors of their internal world. If someone criticizes harshly, everything, often it's less about you and more about their own fears of being inadequate. If someone constantly seeks attention, it's often because they fear being invisible or forgotten, everything. If someone is generous to a fault, it may not only be kindness, it may be their way of ensuring they are loved and accepted, everything. When you begin to see behavior not as random but as communication, your interactions change. You stop reacting and start understanding. Now let's go deeper. Everything. At the heart of human behavior are a handful of universal needs. Psychologists often talk about needs for certainty, variety, significance, love, growth, and contribution, everything. Every action you see around you, in one way or another, is a strategy to meet these needs. Think of the person who works long hours, sacrificing health and relationships. On the surface, everything. You might call them ambitious or even obsessive, but beneath it, what they are often chasing is significance. The need to feel important, to prove themselves, to matter, everything. Or take the person who constantly changes jobs, partners, or hobbies. It's easy to label them as inconsistent, but more often than not, they're simply meeting their need for variety, everything, for adventure, for newness. When you realize this, the way you see people softens. Judgment turns into curiosity. Instead of asking, why are they like that? You begin to ask, everything. What need are they trying to meet? That simple shift can transform your relationships. A spouse who nags isn't always trying to control. They may be craving certainty, everything, reassurance that things are stable. A friend who withdraws isn't always cold. They may be overwhelmed and seeking safety in solitude, everything. A colleague who takes credit might not be arrogant. They may be desperate for significance. Once you know the need, you know the story. And this doesn't just help you with others, everything. It helps you understand yourself. Why do you procrastinate? Why do you sometimes feel drawn to toxic relationships? Why do you overthink before taking action? None of these are random flaws, everything. They're patterns driven by needs. When you can decode your own behavior, you stop seeing yourself as broken and start seeing yourself as human. Let me share with you a story about Maya, everything. A woman who constantly found herself in relationships where she was undervalued. She would give everything, her time, her energy, her love, and in return, she was taken for granted, everything. Over and over, the cycle repeated. At first glance, it was easy to say she just had bad luck in relationships. But luck had nothing to do with it, everything. Maya's behavior was rooted in her deep need for love and acceptance. She believed that if she gave more, sacrificed more, she would finally earn the love she craved, everything. Her pattern was invisible to her, but predictable. Once she recognized that her giving wasn't being fueled by genuine choice, but by fear of rejection, everything shifted, everything. She stopped trying to earn love and started demanding mutual respect. Understanding her own behavior freed her from a cycle she thought she couldn't escape. Human behavior, everything, when stripped down, is both simple and profound. We are creatures of habit driven by emotion, shaped by experience, and wired for survival. If you look at someone's childhood, everything, you will often see the blueprint for their adult behavior. The child who grows up in chaos often craves control as an adult, everything. The child who is constantly compared to others may spend a lifetime trying to prove they are enough, everything. The child who learns early that affection is conditional may struggle to trust love later in life. These are not coincidences. They are predictable outcomes of unmet needs, everything. But here's where empowerment comes in. When you learn to decode human nature, you no longer feel like life is happening to you. You gain clarity, everything. That co-worker's harsh tone no longer ruins your day because you see the fear behind it. That stranger's rudeness doesn't shatter your mood, everything, because you recognize it as pain spilling over. You stop taking things so personally because you realize people are not acting against you. They are acting out their own patterns, everything. And with that clarity comes freedom. Think about it. How different would your life be if you could walk into a conversation and instantly sense what the other person truly needs, everything. If you could see the fear behind anger, the insecurity behind arrogance, the longing behind distance, how much more influence would you have, not through force, but through understanding, everything. This is what decoding human nature gives you, the ability to navigate people, not with judgment or frustration, but with insight and compassion, everything. Here's an exercise you can begin practicing immediately. The next time someone's behavior puzzles you or frustrates you, stop and ask yourself, what is the need behind this, everything? What is the fear or desire driving it? Do not look at the behavior as the problem. Look at it as a clue. If a friend cancels plans last minute, instead of instantly feeling offended, everything. Ask yourself what need they might be meeting. Maybe they needed rest. Maybe they were overwhelmed. Maybe they were protecting themselves from burnout. You may still hold them accountable, everything. But your reaction comes from understanding, not assumption. As you practice this, patterns become clear. You start to notice that certain people always act out when they feel ignored, everything. Others always retreat when they feel criticized. Over time, you'll almost be able to predict it. And that prediction is power. Not the power to manipulate, but the power to connect, everything. To respond wisely, to see reality as it is instead of how it appears in the moment. And perhaps the most beautiful thing is this: when you learn to decode human nature, everything, you also learn compassion. You see that behind every mask is a human being trying in their own imperfect way to meet a need, to feel safe, to feel significant, to feel loved, everything. And when you meet that humanity with understanding, your own humanity expands. There is a silent force that shapes the quality of your relationships, your decisions, everything, and even the way people perceive you. It is not IQ, not charisma, not luck. It is something quieter, often overlooked, but infinitely more powerful: emotional intelligence, everything. Think about the last time you felt misunderstood. Maybe you were frustrated at work or hurt by something a friend said, and instead of clarity, Things escalated into conflict, everything. On the surface, it might have seemed like just a communication problem. But beneath it all was a lack of awareness of your emotions, their emotions, everything, and the way those emotions were colliding. Emotional intelligence is the bridge that prevents these collisions, and when you master it, you stop being reactive and start becoming intentional. Everything. Most of us grow up believing that emotions are unpredictable waves we simply ride through. Anger, sadness, excitement, jealousy, joy. But in truth, emotions are signals, not enemies. Everything. They are data. They are a language that tells you what's happening in your inner world and what matters most to you. Everything. The problem is not the existence of emotions. It is our inability to recognize, interpret, and regulate them. If you want to master human behavior, everything, you must first master your emotional world, because you cannot read others accurately until you can read yourself clearly. I want you to picture this, everything. A leader walks into a room full of tense employees. The project is behind schedule, deadlines are looming, and everyone feels stressed. Now, imagine two possible versions of this leader. Everything. In the first version, the leader is unaware of his own stress. His body language is rigid, his tone sharp, his words impatient. The energy spreads like wildfire. Everything, amplifying the very tension he hoped to solve. In the second version, the leader walks in, fully aware of his stress, takes a deep breath, grounds himself, everything, and acknowledges the room's tension with empathy. Instead of fueling anxiety, he speaks calmly, asks questions, and listens. The difference in outcomes is night and day. Everything. The first destroys trust, the second builds it. That is emotional intelligence in action. The first pillar of emotional intelligence is self-awareness. Without it, you're flying blind. Everything. Self-awareness means you can pause in the heat of the moment and notice, I am angry right now. I am nervous. I am excited. It sounds simple, but most people skip this step. Everything. They merge with the emotion, letting it control their decisions without ever stepping back to observe it. Imagine trying to play chess without seeing the board. You'd be reacting blindly. Everything. Piece by piece, without strategy. Self-awareness gives you the board. It lets you see your feelings for what they are, information, not identity. You are not anger. Everything. You are experiencing anger. You are not sadness. You are experiencing sadness. This small shift transforms how you carry yourself in every interaction. But awareness alone is not enough. Everything. The second step is regulation. The ability to manage what you feel so that emotions work for you, not against you. This doesn't mean suppressing emotions or pretending they don't exist. Everything. It means channeling them wisely. For example, anger can be destructive if it explodes unchecked, but it can also fuel courage when directed constructively. Anxiety can paralyze you. Everything. But it can also sharpen your focus before a big presentation if you learn how to ride the wave. Regulation is about giving your emotions a seat at the table, but not the steering wheel. Everything. There's a story I often share about a man who worked in a high-pressure sales job. Every rejection used to crush him. Everything. He would spiral into self-doubt and lose motivation for the rest of the day. Then he learned to regulate his emotions by reframing the meaning of rejection. Everything. Instead of seeing it as a personal failure, he began viewing it as a numbers game. Every no brought him closer to the next. Was. He still felt the sting of rejection. Everything. But it no longer hijacked his day. That's emotional regulation, not eliminating the feeling, but mastering your response to it. Now, once you can recognize and regulate your own emotions, everything. The next step is turning outward, developing empathy. Empathy is not just about feeling sorry for someone, it's about truly understanding what they feel and why. When someone is upset, everything. Most people either dismiss it, don't worry about it, you'll be fine, or try to fix it quickly. But people don't always need fixing. Sometimes, everything. What they need is for someone to sit with them and say, I hear you. I understand why you feel that way. That level of presence can be life-changing. It diffuses defensiveness. Everything. Builds trust and creates connection. Think of a time when you were really struggling. Did advice help, or did the presence of someone who genuinely cared mean more? Chances are, everything. It was the latter. Empathy is what turns ordinary conversations into meaningful ones. It makes people feel seen. And here's the hidden benefit when you develop empathy. Everything. Your influence grows naturally. People follow those who understand them, not those who simply instruct them. Let me give you an example from a classroom setting. Everything. A teacher notices one of her students constantly misbehaving, disrupting lessons and lashing out. Without empathy, she might label him as a problem child and respond with punishment. Everything. But an empathetic teacher digs deeper. She learns that the student's home life is unstable, filled with chaos and neglect. Suddenly, his behavior makes sense. It's a cry for attention, everything, for stability. Instead of punishment, she gives him extra support and structure. Over time, the boy transforms. Same behavior, but with empathy, the outcome changes. Everything. That's the power of seeing beneath the surface. And here's the truth: developing empathy requires slowing down. Most of us rush through conversations, everything, half listening while planning our next response. But if you pause, truly tune in, and pay attention to not just the words but the tone, the pauses, everything, the body language, you begin to hear what's unsaid. A friend says, "I'm fine," but their shoulders are slumped. A colleague says, "No worries," but their jaw is tight. Everything. If you take the time to notice, you realize fine often means the opposite. Now let's tie this together. Emotional intelligence is not just about managing emotions in calm situations. Everything. It's about thriving in conflict, in pressure, in chaos. Picture two business partners in a heated disagreement. One reacts defensively, raising his voice, everything, shutting down any possibility of collaboration. The other, though frustrated, pauses to regulate his tone, acknowledges the other's concerns, everything, and reframes the conflict as a problem to solve together. That simple shift de-escalates the tension and leads to resolution. Everything. The difference is not who is right or wrong. It was emotional intelligence. The more you cultivate this skill, the more powerful you become in every aspect of life. Everything. You'll find your relationships deepen. You'll earn respect in ways that brute force or intellect alone could never achieve. You'll be able to step into tense situations and bring calm. Everything. You'll stop being a prisoner to your emotions and start using them as tools. And in a world where most people are reactive, the person who can remain centered, empathetic, everything, and emotionally intelligent becomes magnetic. So ask yourself, how often do I pause to check in with my own emotions before I speak? How often do I truly listen? Everything. Not just to words but to the feelings behind them. How often do I choose a response instead of unleashing a reaction? These questions are not small. They are the doorway to mastery. Everything. Because when you own your emotional world, you create a ripple effect. The people around you feel safer, calmer, more understood. And as you develop this muscle, everything, you'll notice something extraordinary. What once felt like vulnerability becomes your greatest strength, and what once felt like chaos becomes clarity. When you sit across from someone, everything, whether it's during a job interview, a first date, or a casual conversation at a coffee shop, there is always more being said than the words that come out of their mouth. Everything. Human beings are walking stories. Every gesture, every shift of posture, every pause in speech is a signal. Most people never notice these signals, and because of that, everything. They miss an entire world of communication that is happening in plain sight. But once you learn to read people like an open book, it feels as if you've been given a superpower. Everything. It's like turning on subtitles in a foreign film. You suddenly understand everything that was once hidden. Think about the last time you felt someone wasn't being fully honest with you. Everything. Maybe a coworker said they were fine with something, but something in their tone or the way they avoided eye contact told you otherwise. Or perhaps you asked a friend how they were doing. Everything. And they smiled and said, "I'm good." But deep down you knew they weren't. That intuition you felt wasn't just a gut reaction. It was your brain picking up on tiny, everything, subconscious cues, body language, tone, micro expressions that most people don't consciously process. Everything. What I want to show you is how to bring those subconscious signals into the light so you can recognize them clearly and respond with intention. Everything. Let's start with the most obvious yet often overlooked element, the body. The human body speaks a language older than words. Before humans ever developed spoken language, everything, we communicated with posture, gestures, and expressions. That ancient code hasn't disappeared. It's still alive in every single one of us today. Crossed arms, for example, everything, are often dismissed as just a casual resting position, but in reality they frequently signal defensiveness or self-protection. Leaning forward can show interest, everything, while leaning back can suggest either relaxation or disengagement, depending on the context. The magic lies in noticing not just one isolated gesture, but patterns, everything. One gesture alone might not mean much, but when several cues line up together, the picture becomes clear. I once coached a young entrepreneur preparing for a critical pitch to investors. Everything. He had rehearsed his words until they were perfect, but his body told a different story. Every time he described the financial risks, everything, he unconsciously rubbed the back of his neck and shifted his weight. The words said confidence, but the body whispered uncertainty. By pointing this out to him, everything, we worked on aligning his message, teaching him to stand tall, maintain eye contact, and let his gestures match his conviction. The result was remarkable. Everything. His presentation went from shaky to commanding, not because he changed the words, but because he learned to master the unspoken side of communication. Now, beyond the body, everything, there's another layer, the voice. Tone carries emotional weight far deeper than the words themselves. You can say the exact same sentence in 10 different tones, everything, and each one will carry a completely different meaning. Imagine saying, "I'm fine." Say it with a light, cheerful tone, and it means one thing. Say it flat, clipped, and without energy, everything, and it means the opposite. The human ear is wired to pick up these subtle shifts. When you start to pay attention, you realize that tone reveals truth more often than words do. Everything. If someone says they're confident, but their voice wavers or trails off, it's usually the tone that's telling you the real story. Everything. One of my clients once shared how she negotiated a salary raise. She told me, wasn't the words that convinced them. It was the way I said it. She spoke with steady rhythm, everything, unwavering tone and a calm pace. Her conviction didn't just sit in the words, it vibrated in her voice. The executives could hear her certainty, everything, and that carried more weight than the logical points alone. Tone is not just about hearing others, it's also a tool you can consciously use to influence how others perceive you. And then, everything. There are micro-expressions. These are the fleeting, involuntary facial expressions that flash across a person's face for just a fraction of a second before they mask them. Everything. They are often impossible to control because they come directly from the brain's emotional centers. Think of it as the truth slipping out before the mask is pulled on. Everything. Someone might smile politely when you announce an idea, but if for a split second you catch their eyes narrowing or their lips tightening, that tiny flash reveals how they really feel. Everything. I remember speaking with a manager who was deciding whether to promote one of her team members. During our conversation, she spoke highly of him, everything, listing his strengths and saying he was a strong candidate. But for a moment, when she mentioned his ability to lead under pressure, everything, her face gave a micro-expression of doubt, a quick tightening of the mouth. That told me everything. She liked him, but she wasn't convinced of his leadership yet. Everything. Micro-expressions are like cracks in the surface of a mask. If you learn to spot them, you gain access to people's genuine feelings even when they try to hide them. Now, everything. Let's bring this all together. Reading people like an open book is not about judging or labeling them. It's not about calling out lies or playing detective. Everything. It's about cultivating awareness. Awareness of the signals people give and awareness of how those signals interact with the words they say. It allows you to respond with empathy, clarity, everything, and strength. Instead of being blind to hidden emotions, you begin to see them clearly, and that gives you choices. You can choose to comfort someone, challenge them, encourage them, everything, or simply adjust your approach to meet them where they are. Think of the parent who notices their child say, "Everything, I'm fine," but also sees the slumped shoulders and hears the heaviness in the tone. Instead of taking the words at face value, the parent leans in and says, "You don't sound fine. Everything, talk to me." That awareness creates connection, everything. Or imagine being in a business negotiation where the other party says they're not in a hurry, but you notice them tapping their foot and glancing at the clock. Suddenly, everything. You know they actually are pressed for time, and you can adjust your strategy accordingly. The more you practice, the more fluent you become in this language. At first, everything. It will feel overwhelming, too many signals, too much to track, but over time your brain begins to integrate it naturally. Just like learning a spoken language, it becomes second nature, everything. You won't consciously analyze every gesture or tone. Instead, you'll simply feel the flow of the conversation with a heightened level of awareness. And people will sense it, everything. They'll feel that you understand them, often without knowing why. That sense of being seen, of being understood, is one of the most powerful connectors in human relationships. Everything. Here's the key to truly master this. You must also pay attention to yourself. Self-awareness is the foundation of reading others. If you can't recognize your own nervous tics, everything, your own shifts in tone, or your own micro-expressions, then you'll struggle to notice them in others. Practice observing yourself in the mirror. Record your voice when you speak, everything. Notice how your face reacts when you feel stress or joy. By becoming fluent in your own signals, you sharpen your ability to decode them in the people around you. Everything. I often tell my students to treat this practice like detective work, but with a heart. Everything. You're not looking for evidence to use against someone. You're uncovering the truth so you can connect more authentically. Everything. When you read someone's body language and recognize their hidden emotion, it's not a weapon, it's a gift. It allows you to be the person who understands when others feel misunderstood. Everything, the listener who hears beyond words, the leader who inspires trust because people feel seen. Everything. Imagine walking into a meeting and noticing who is genuinely engaged and who is checked out before anyone says a word. Everything. Imagine meeting someone new and being able to sense their comfort level instantly. Imagine being able to detect when a loved one is holding back their true feelings. Everything, so you can draw them closer instead of letting distance grow. Everything. That is the spark of excitement I want you to feel right now. The realization that the world has been communicating with you all along, and you are now learning to hear it. Everything. When most people hear the word influence, their minds immediately drift toward manipulation, persuasion tricks, or strategies to outsmart someone else. But influence, real influence, everything, is not about pulling strings. It's not about bending people to your will or controlling their choices. It's about something far more powerful, far more sustainable, and far more human. Everything. Influence, in its purest form, is about creating trust, earning respect, and adding genuine value in every interaction you have. The person who understands this doesn't need to push. Everything. They don't need to chase approval. They don't need to fake charm or play games. Their presence alone draws people in because it radiates authenticity and strength. Everything. Think about the people who've left the deepest mark on your life. It might be a teacher, a mentor, a parent, a friend, or even a stranger you met at just the right time. Everything. What made their impact so powerful? Chances are, it wasn't that they forced their ideas onto you. It wasn't that they pressured you to think or behave a certain way. Everything. It was that you felt seen, you felt understood, and you felt that they genuinely cared. That's the art of influence without manipulation. Everything. One of the greatest myths we've been sold is that influence requires flashy charisma or sharp tactics. We're told that to lead, we must dominate. To persuade, we must pressure. Everything. To win people over, we must play the game better than they do. But real life doesn't work like that. Manipulation might give you temporary results, but it always comes with a cost. Everything. The cost is trust, and once trust is broken, influence evaporates. True influence, on the other hand, compounds over time. It's built like a savings account, where every act of honesty, everything, every moment of listening, every time you follow through on your word, adds value to your character in the eyes of others. People remember how you made them feel. Everything. People remember whether they walked away from you with more confidence or less, with more hope or less. That is the quiet but unstoppable force of authentic influence. Let me share a story. Everything. A few years ago, a young professional I'll call Maya was working in a competitive corporate environment. Around her, colleagues were constantly trying to outshine one another. Everything. Scrambling for promotions and recognition. The culture was thick with manipulation. Backhanded compliments, office politics, subtle sabotage. But Maya did something different. Everything. Instead of joining the race of appearances, she focused on building genuine relationships. She listened to people. She helped without keeping score. Everything. She gave credit publicly and offered feedback privately. Over time, something interesting happened. When big decisions were on the table, when the team felt uncertain, people turned to her. Everything. She wasn't the loudest in the room, nor the one with the fanciest title, but she had earned trust. She became the natural leader, not because she demanded it. Everything, but because others willingly gave her that place. That is influence without manipulation, quiet, authentic, and undeniable. Now let's pause and ask everything. How do we create this kind of influence in our own lives? The first step is to shift our mindset from control to connection. Manipulation says, everything. How can I get what I want out of this person? Authentic influence says, how can I create a moment of value in this person's life? That shift may sound small, everything, but it changes everything. Because when people sense you genuinely care, they let down their guard, they listen, they open up. And in that openness lies the foundation of influence. Everything. Think of the last time you felt truly listened to. Not half. Listened to while someone scrolled on their phone, not politely nodded at while their mind was elsewhere, but deeply, everything attentively heard. How did it feel? It felt like a gift, didn't it? Now imagine being the one who gives that gift to others consistently. Suddenly, people want to be around you. Everything. Not because you entertain them, not because you flatter them, but because you make them feel significant. That is the essence of influence. Another important principle is consistency. Everything. Influence is not built in a single conversation, it's built across time. Imagine someone who is kind one day but dismissive the next, generous in one moment but self-serving the next. Everything. Their inconsistency creates confusion, and confusion erodes trust. But when your words and actions align day after day, everything. When you show up with the same respect, whether speaking to a CEO or a janitor, people begin to trust not just what you say, but who you are. And that's when influence deepens. Everything. There's also something magnetic about integrity. Integrity doesn't mean perfection, it means wholeness. It means your actions reflect your values, even when no one is watching. Everything. People can feel when you are congruent. They can sense when your energy and your intentions line up. And in a world where so many wear masks, authenticity is irresistible. Now, everything. Does this mean we abandon persuasion altogether? Absolutely not. Persuasion is still a vital skill. Everything. But there's a difference between persuasion built on pressure and persuasion built on respect. Think about it. When someone pressures you, your instinct is to resist. Everything. But when someone respects you, when they present their perspective honestly while honoring your freedom to choose, you're far more open. Everything. Influence without manipulation works because it honors people's autonomy. You don't need to trap someone into agreement. Everything. You simply present your truth in a way that connects with their needs, their emotions, and their vision of themselves. Here's something to reflect on. Everything. People don't usually follow ideas. They follow people. And people follow those who embody qualities they admire. If you want influence, don't just tell others what to do. Live it. Everything. Model it. Inspire by example. If you want to influence your team to be more disciplined, show your own discipline. If you want your children to be kind, show kindness in how you treat others. Everything. If you want your peers to be more committed, let them see your commitment. Influence flows most powerfully from example. But there's also a softer side to influence. Vulnerability. Everything. We often think influence comes only from strength, but sometimes it comes from openness. When you admit you don't have all the answers, when you share your struggles with honesty. Everything. When you let others see that you too are human, it creates connection. And connection fuels trust. People don't want flawless leaders. They want real ones. Everything. One of the best practical tools you can use to cultivate influence is asking better questions. Questions show you care. Questions open doors. Questions create dialogue instead of monologue. Everything. Instead of telling someone what they should do, ask them what they want most. Ask them what matters to them. Ask them what challenges they're facing, and then listen. Often, everything. The very act of asking is enough to shift someone's perspective, because it gives them space to think more deeply. There's a story about a coach who worked with young athletes. Everything. Instead of barking instructions every second, he would ask questions like, everything. What did you notice about your performance in that moment? Or, how do you think you could adjust to get a better result? At first, the athletes were surprised. Everything. They expected commands. But over time, they grew more thoughtful, more engaged, more committed, because they felt ownership. That's influence without manipulation. Everything. Guiding someone toward their own discoveries rather than forcing them into yours. In daily life, you'll encounter countless opportunities to practice this. Everything. It could be in a meeting where you choose to highlight someone else's idea instead of pushing your own. Everything. It could be in a friendship where you choose to listen instead of jumping in with advice. Everything. It could be in a negotiation where you focus on creating a win-win outcome rather than squeezing every drop for yourself. Each moment you choose connection over control. Everything. Respect over pressure. Authenticity over pretense. You strengthen your influence. And here's the beautiful paradox: when you stop trying to control people, everything, you often end up with more influence than ever. Why? Because people naturally gravitate toward those who make them feel safe, respected, and valued. Everything. They trust you not because you forced them to, but because you gave them every reason to. So the art of influence without manipulation is not about learning tricks. Everything. It's about learning to be deeply human. It's about presence. It's about honesty. It's about creating value so real that people want to follow your lead. Not because they have to, everything, but because they choose to, and when influence is built on choice, it lasts. Everything. There comes a point in every journey where the lessons you've gathered aren't just things you practice occasionally. They become who you are. Everything. That is the essence of building lifelong social mastery. It's no longer about memorizing techniques, recalling strategies, or analyzing every little detail of human behavior. Everything. It's about living in a way where awareness, empathy, and influence flow naturally from you, almost as if they've always been a part of your character. And the beautiful truth is, everything they can be. Think about the people you've met who leave a lasting impression without even trying. They walk into a room, and something about them feels steady, magnetic, and authentic. Everything. They don't dominate every conversation, but when they speak, people listen. They don't pretend to be overly agreeable, yet somehow, they connect deeply with nearly everyone. Everything. That quality isn't luck. It's not charisma they were born with. It's a cultivated lifestyle of social mastery, day by day, moment by moment, decision by decision. Everything. The foundation of this lifestyle begins with self-awareness. Social intelligence starts within. You cannot truly understand others if you do not understand yourself. Everything. Lifelong mastery requires you to continually reflect on your values, your triggers, and the way you show up in the world. For instance, let's say you're in a heated meeting at work. Everything. Tension is rising, voices are raised, and emotions are on edge. A person without mastery reacts impulsively. They get defensive, maybe shut down, or escalate the conflict. Everything. But someone who has trained their mind to stay centered notices the wave of emotion rising within themselves and chooses a conscious response. Instead of matching the chaos, everything, they become the calm. And in doing so, they shift the entire atmosphere of the room. That ability to remain composed, grounded, and intentional is the seed of lifelong social mastery. Everything. But awareness alone is not enough. You must combine it with consistent practice. Social mastery is built in the small, daily interactions most people overlook. Everything. Every time you greet the barista who hands you your coffee, you're practicing. Every time you listen fully to a friend without interrupting, you're practicing. Everything. Every time you notice the subtle hesitation in a coworker's tone and ask them if they're okay, you're practicing. These little moments, accumulated over weeks and months and years, everything, are what shape you into someone others trust, respect, and are naturally drawn to. Consider someone like Nelson Mandela. When he was released after 27 years in prison, everything. He could have easily emerged bitter, filled with resentment. Instead, he chose reconciliation. He listened to his former enemies, he sought to understand them, everything, and he created bridges where most would have built walls. That level of mastery doesn't appear overnight. It comes from years of practicing empathy, patience, everything, and emotional strength in even the hardest circumstances. While most of us will never endure what Mandela endured, we can learn from the principle, everything. Social mastery is not about perfection in rare big moments. It is about cultivating strength in countless small ones so that, when the big moments arrive, you are already prepared. Everything. Another pillar of lifelong mastery is adaptability. People change, environments shift, cultures evolve. What makes you socially intelligent today may need adjusting tomorrow. Everything. A truly masterful individual doesn't cling rigidly to a single way of interacting. They evolve with time, with context, with the unique people in front of them. Everything. Imagine a skilled musician. They don't just learn one song and play it for life. They learn the scales, the structures, the techniques, so they can adapt to any piece of music. Everything. In the same way, when you internalize the principles of human behavior, you can adapt seamlessly, whether you're speaking to a child, negotiating with a business partner, everything, comforting a grieving friend, or addressing an audience of thousands. And yet, adaptability doesn't mean inauthenticity. In fact, authenticity is the heart of social mastery. Everything. The world is full of people who wear masks, who try to impress, who bend themselves out of shape to be accepted. Everything. But authenticity, being aligned with who you truly are, is what people crave. You cannot fake genuine care, and you cannot fake presence. Everything. When people sense that your words and your actions come from a place of truth, the walls drop. They feel safe. They open up. They remember you. Everything. The paradox is that the more comfortable you become with your true self, the more effortlessly you can connect with others. Now, let's talk about growth. Everything. Lifelong mastery is not a finish line you cross once and for all. It is a journey of continuous learning. Every interaction, whether smooth or messy, is feedback. Did you listen deeply, everything, or did you drift? Did you influence positively, or did you push too hard? Did you understand the needs of the group, or did you miss the subtle signs? Everything. The masters aren't the ones who never stumble. They are the ones who reflect, who learn, and who adjust. In this way, mistakes are not failures. They are the curriculum. Every conflict, everything, every awkward silence, every misunderstanding is a classroom for mastery if you are willing to treat it as one. I want you to imagine a version of yourself 10 years from now. Everything. Not just a little more experienced, but deeply skilled in the art of connection. You walk into a networking event and you immediately notice who is anxious, who is confident, everything, who is eager to connect, and who is standing alone wishing someone would approach them. Without hesitation, you move toward the one who feels left out, everything. And with a genuine smile and warm presence, you draw them into the circle. Later, you deliver your ideas with clarity and calm, and people not only hear your words, they feel your conviction, everything. This future version of you doesn't wonder, how do I act? They don't scramble to remember tips or tricks. They simply live mastery because it has become ingrained in their identity, everything. That is where this path leads if you stay consistent. One practical way to make mastery stick is through intentional habits. Just as athletes train their bodies, everything. You must train your social mind. Create a habit of daily reflection. At the end of the day, ask yourself, where did I connect well? Where could I have listened better? Everything. Where did I let my emotions lead me instead of leading them? Small daily check-ins like these sharpen your awareness over time. Another powerful habit is practicing empathy on purpose. Everything. For example, before entering a conversation, pause and ask yourself, what might this person be carrying with them today? Everything. What could they be feeling that I cannot see? Approaching interactions with curiosity instead of judgment shifts your entire presence. And don't underestimate the habit of silence. Everything in a world filled with noise, the ability to listen without rushing, to pause before responding. Everything to let someone fully express themselves without interruption. That is a rare and powerful gift. People remember how you made them feel, everything. And being fully heard is one of the greatest feelings you can give another human being. There will be times when mastery feels difficult. You will encounter people who test your patience, everything, who seem impossible to understand, or who reject your efforts to connect. But even in those moments, you have a choice. You can slip back into frustration, everything, or you can see it as advanced training. Just as a weightlifter grows stronger by lifting heavier weights, your ability to remain empathetic and composed grows when tested against resistance, everything. The very challenges you face in social interactions are the opportunities that forge mastery in you. Ultimately, everything. Building lifelong social mastery is about stepping into a way of being where confidence, empathy, and influence are not occasional skills, but your second nature, everything. It's about becoming the kind of person who elevates every room they enter, not because they demand attention, but because their presence brings clarity, trust, and calm, everything. It's about walking through life with the quiet power of someone who knows themselves, understands others, and uses that understanding not for manipulation, but for connection and growth, everything. And when you live this way consistently, day after day, year after year, you set yourself apart, not through force, but through mastery.